Hi, everyone. Welcome. And again, if you were at AFP this week, we hope you are recovering. My name is Karen Houghton. I'm the CEO and founder of Infinite Giving, and we're glad everyone is here today. At Infinite Giving, we work with nonprofits across the country by helping them build financial strength, not just through fundraising, but how they steward and grow the resources entrusted to them. One thing we see over and over again is that nonprofits, of course, are working incredibly hard to raise money, but often they're only asking for a fraction of what donors are actually able to give. And that's because most donor wealth today isn't sitting in cash, right? It's held in assets such as stocks, investment accounts, retirement accounts, all of that more complicated giving. So today's conversation is about what it looks like to move beyond cash and then step into this new role as a strategic advisor by helping guide your donors to give from their abundance. So I'm really excited to be joined by someone who's been leading this conversation in a very practical and data-driven way. Sari McConnell. She is a founder and CEO of Donor Boom. I was actually fortunate enough to finally meet her in real life at the AFP Icon Conference this week, and we were chatting up a storm within minutes. Sari is a certified fundraising executive. She's got an MBA from Kellogg, and she leads a data-driven fundraising consulting firm that helps nonprofits grow revenue in smarter, more strategic ways. And we're like-minded in so many different conversations. So her work around that data-powered fundraising and the concept of being a generosity guide, which I love. I already used advisor. And Sari, I know you're like, no, we love guide. So generosity guide. She's been featured across multiple organizations in the most recent edition of AFP magazine. So Sari, welcome. We're so glad to have you here. Anything else you want to share about your background with your audience?
Well, thank you so much for having me, Karen. And it was really special to meet you in real life just a few days ago. As you mentioned, I founded Donor Boom as a data-driven strategic fundraising firm to help nonprofits grow their revenue in bold ways, confidently. And that's why I'm so excited about the work that you're doing at Infinite Giving because it pairs up perfectly with this concept we've developed at Donor Boom, becoming a generosity guide, which really changes the role of the fundraising professional in profound and high impact ways.
Awesome. Well, we all want to be generosity guides, so I'm excited for our conversation. And as we go throughout these questions, I know it is a short time, so we're going to try to get to everything we can. For those of you watching, please know that you can put in Q&A. So we have the Q&A function in your Zoom toolbar, and we will do our best to answer as many as we can. So I'll keep an eye on that. So feel free to ask any questions that you have for Sari or myself. All right, let's get started. All right. Most organizations, as we just talked about, are still overwhelmingly fundraising in cash, right? Credit card, debit, maybe we're getting fancy, Apple Pay and Venmo. But we don't often see real wealth giving kind of call to actions, right? Asset giving, stocks, crypto, DAF, or even endowment giving is almost never mentioned. Instead, fundraisers wait for donors to mention it to them first. But the reality is 90% of wealth in the US is held in assets, not cash. So when we ask for the cash, they're asking from the smallest bucket available to them. So, Sari, from your perspective, why do you think this is? Is it a knowledge gap, a confidence gap, systems gap? What do you think it is?
Of course, it's all three.
Of course. Of
And
course.
I will tell you, what if we thought about wealth gap giving not just from a planned giving perspective, but from an all giving perspective? When we developed this generosity guide model, we were actually thinking about how big of an impact wealth giving might have on the annual campaign. So I really want you to expand your thinking about how wealth gifts can be used to grow your organization, not just special occasion types of situations. And when you think about it as something you could be doing across all of your fundraising, that involves pretty profound shifts, in your strategy. So it is all three, of course, confidence, of course, systems and knowledge. Let's start with knowledge. So Dr. Russell James out of Texas Tech University um, completed this truly landmark study in which he pulled the 990s of hundreds of thousands of nonprofits over a 5-year period and discovered that nonprofits who were taking in gifts from wealth were growing at 5 times the rate of nonprofits that didn't. That is huge.
Yes.
To have so much data that proves that point. We're still digesting that information, frankly. He's been very actively speaking about it, but it takes a while because it has such profound effects on our strategy to figure out how to get people to give from wealth. He's told us that by getting the wealth, this will happen, but the next frontier is how. So that's the knowledge, and that's what the generosity guide concept is all about.
And there's nobody here who doesn't want to raise like another 50% just from
Yep.
changing how they're already doing it. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. So it's pretty motivating. People are like very excited about this research, but how? That's a pretty big bridge to cross for most nonprofit organizations. So second is systems. You need to make giving from wealth as frictionless as possible. Karen, you and I love that word, frictionless. It's got to be frictionless, not only because everyone expects everything to be done in a New York minute, but when you create a more frictionless environment for giving, you're actually inspiring confidence that your organization is open for business and can handle that type of seemingly complex transaction. And there are a lot of things that you can do on your website to instill that confidence, ways to give page with all the options, leading with your tax ID number everywhere. I know Infinite Giving has this great widget that makes it just about as easy to donate from wealth as just putting in your credit card in the I'll call it old-fashioned donation transaction page. These are system upgrades that both signal to the donor that you're open for business and also enables your organization to process um, these types of gifts in
Mhm.
an efficient way. I might also add that one of the most important things is to have a brokerage relationship. Um, that's part of your systems setup. And then, of course, confidence. So I would say giving from wealth is actually easy. What's hard is changing your giving behavior as a donor. What's hard is nonprofits changing how they typically receive gifts and mark them in their donor, database. Um, and there is some key learning. So one of the core motivational forces that you have as a fundraising professional to get someone to start giving from wealth instead of disposable income is articulating to your donors who are itemizing their taxes that there are much tax smarter ways to give than
Mhm.
giving from their credit card. And being able to identify for them what a few of those are, you got to internalize that and be able to speak about it confidently and know, and this is, you were asking me about big obstacles. There's a huge vacuum right now, as I see it, between the donor and the financial advisor in terms of um, enabling the donor to donate from wealth and make more tax smart decisions. The financial advisor is not responsible for your mission or your operating budget. They have a job to do and they certainly facilitate tax smart giving. But the donor actually should be coming to their financial advisors with tax smart questions.
Yes.
And that's how a fundraising professional acts as a generosity guide, arming those donors with just enough information and motivation to get them to take the step of contacting their advisor, putting the wheels in place, setting up a new way of giving, and then forevermore they give that way. And it's actually quite easy. So the hardest part is making the change happen. And that's the role that that's the role that fundraising professionals can play. They're not playing it right now. And we are heartily encouraging fundraising professionals to step into this new role.
Yeah. I believe the stat is that I think it's around 85% of nonprofits don't have a brokerage account. And so when you're looking
Wow.
at they don't have a brokerage account, they can't receive stock gifts, right? Or they have to use a pass through. And then there are other solutions where you're like, oh, there, no, I can do it. But then the fundraising folks are the ones who need to guide it. And often we have found that people aren't sure. They're like, well, I think we have the capacity, or it's somewhere on our website, or we just wait for the donors to, if the donor wants to give that way, they'll ask us. And I know generally for us, we're like, no, 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 you have to be proactive. Like you have to be able to say, hey, do you have securities? Or did you know? Or here's an available pathway to make it as easy as possible. Why do you think it's so hard for us to make kind of bridge that gap on that side as a fundraising professional?
Um, we're not used to it.
Yeah.
It
And it feels
requires us.
foreign, right? It's also
Yeah.
like hard to be like, I don't know. And I'm like, you don't have to be the expert, but you need to know enough to where you can at least open that pathway and say, you should talk to
Oh
your
my gosh, Karen,
CPA.
you are landing it because one of the things that I emphasize is that one of the first things you need to say is, I'm not a financial advisor and I'm not a tax advisor. I'm a fundraising professional, but we are seeing other donors do tax smart things in how they're supporting our organization. Let me share a few of them with
Yeah.
you. You don't need to know everything. In
No.
fact, you don't need to know most of it. And in fact, if you claim it, hey, that's the question that the donor then asks you that's out of your league, that is a great question. And it's a perfect one to ask your financial advisor.
Because
That actually
yeah,
builds your credibility as a generosity guide to say,
yeah.
see, I told you I'm not a tax advisor, but we're going to send you along the way on your way with the right questions to ask. And people just generally feel uncomfortable about not knowing all the answers when they step into a new role. I'm saying that you should embrace it. Know I call it a red line. Don't make stuff up.
Yeah.
And you might even just get two sentences deep with a donor in which you hit your red line, and that's fine.
Mhm.
Go talk to your advisor because the whole point of the conversation is to motivate you to talk to their advisor. That is the point of being a generosity guide. And I'll tell you one thing, if
Yeah.
you're the person who creates the spark that gets them to ask the right questions to their advisor, guess who's going to be the recipient of the first wealth gift they make?
Mhm.
Your organization.
Yeah.
And if you don't stand on that bridge, and if you don't act as that generosity guide, who knows? Dr. James's research says 5x, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's coming to you. You still need to put yourself out there and advocate for your mission and being a generosity guide and creating that spark. That's how you make it happen.
It's amazing how many from small organizations to larger organizations still like because I get a lot of emails, calls, my family, we're philanthropic too, and it's
Yeah.
hey, donate, click here. And I'm like, cool, here's a credit card, right? And the average credit card donation is $128. The average stock gift nationally is between $7,000 and $8,000. So when we're talking about wealth, they're less common, but they're bigger gifts. And it is a difference. Like if you're talking to major donors and you're sending them a credit card link, there are limits there. And it does change the conversation when you're being like, actually, we have the infrastructure and the ability as a sustainable organization or an organization seeking sustainability to have conversations with big donors. Because if you don't engage there, big organizations stay big and small organizations stay small because those generous givers are going to the organizations who can have the infrastructure and the ability to receive those types of gifts. And we get really passionate about helping small to mid-sized nonprofits get more of those bigger gifts.
I'll tell you what, it also, all great points. It also solves a huge problem for fundraising professionals who are very frequently posed with the challenge by their executive director or their board. Hey, we need you to bring in an additional $500,000 this year. And
Easy.
the fundraising professional goes, where did that number come from? Um, Once you have somebody who starts giving from wealth, donor advised funds, qualified charitable distributions, stock, etc., once they start giving from wealth, that is the biggest tell that you have as a fundraising professional that they are in a position to 10x the current donation that they are giving you for the annual campaign. And why is that? It's not just that 90% of our wealth is sitting in our brokerage account, is sitting in wealth. It's that the money that is sitting in your checking account connected to that credit card, that checking account is responsible for your kids' clarinet lessons, the orthodontist, tuition, gas, the mortgage. You're now in a very competitive environment, and suddenly and that cause where everything's earmarked. So the donor is, whether they're aware consciously of it or not, they're doing mental math and they're making trade-offs of how much can I afford to give away generously that won't compromise the other obligations that I have. So immediately you're thinking smaller. As
Mhm.
generously as they are thinking, they are still thinking smaller. As soon as you shift into the wealth, so we're talking about funds, not only your 90% of your wealth is there, but funds that don't have, that aren't earmarked for a specific expense. Yes, globally, they have a purpose for my retirement, for a medical emergency, for my kid's wedding one day, for the big trips that we want to take, but it's ambiguous.
Mhm.
And so you have a much better shot if somebody starts giving wealth, maybe they just start out at, the first time that they switch over to wealth, their $1,000 credit card gift is $1,000 coming from wealth. That's fine. But the next time that you're approaching them, you know that they're now giving from wealth, and you can say, I have this big project, we're looking to fund it. Would you be willing to give $10,000 this year to help support this program? And you know that the funds exist. And you know that those funds are not competing for all the things that are sitting in the checking account. And
Mhm.
that gives you, as the fundraising professional, the platform to ask more ambitiously, not incremental little bits, but a big leap forward.
And the
That is
tax
what I,
efficiencies
and the
help
tax
too.
efficiencies,
Yeah.
right?
And it's so like, so when we look at stock giving, right, a donor can save up to roughly 35% in capital gains taxes. So what that means is if they're giving, $100 in stocks, we'll take a small number, right? Just so it's clean and easy, but $100 in stocks, if they have to then convert it to cash and then give it to the nonprofit's going to end up with $65 because they're having to pay capital gains taxes and everything to the government, and then that's the cash gift. If they're able to give you $100 from securities into your brokerage account as securities, not only do you get the full $100 because they're not paying capital gains taxes, the donors then also get to claim that full gift. So it's actually doubly tax beneficial. And we often see, like I've done presentations to boards and I have people lined up and they're like, wait, this works on mutual funds. We can do this. And these are organizations that like we serve and are actively doing stocks. And then I'll go to the development teams. I did this the other day. I was like, do you see this line of men mostly who were asking me about stock giving?
Yeah.
And I was like, you guys receive stocks. They actually receive a lot. And I was like, but when I receive your emails, when I receive your mailers, you're not mentioning it. And you have people on your board. I mean, they have a national board and then chapters. So it was a big group of people. But I was like, you have people who still don't know about the tax efficiencies of this type of giving. And it's important to know because then they can often give bigger gifts. So we know a lot of fundraising professionals who they'll say, "Oh, did you know that if you give in this way, you can save on taxes," which means they could actually give an extra 20% to you on top of what they were already going to give and still come out at the top on the tax side of things. So tax efficiencies is not the reason someone gives, right?
No.
That's not the main motivator. But how they give and how much they can give is when those conversations come into play.
Yes, and that's why we recommend turning on your generosity guide light for existing donors.
Yeah.
It is not the time to talk about tax efficient giving when you are trying to attract a brand new donor. Your first and foremost job is to attract someone to your mission and the programs that you offer that are, manifestations of your mission.
Yeah.
It's once they've bought in. Once they've bought into the impact of your organization, once they've started getting to know you as an organization, then you can have more of these sophisticated conversations. Now, I
Yeah.
would also say I am starting to see in the Marcoms of nonprofits, they are starting to roll out, they're doing a much better job, little by little, of explaining tax efficient ways to give. As a generosity guide, however, we are suggesting one-on-one conversations.
Mm.
It's doing Marcom is not enough. You're not really creating that. It's like a very light spark to get somebody to talk to their broker. What you want to do, and I'll tell you this, fundraising professionals have a hard time getting their donors to call them back. Donors are very busy people.
Yeah.
If you call up a donor and leave a voicemail, as we always do, and say, "Hey, I've got a tax smart tip for you to enable you to continue supporting our organization, call me back." Guess what? You're going to get a call back.
Yeah.
People want
That's true. That's a good
that
tip.
information.
Yeah. And we did have somebody ask a question just to repeat some of those average national averages of gift sizes. So the average online credit or debit gift is $128. The national average for stock giving is somewhere between $7,000 and $8,000. Average crypto is around 10,000. So again, it goes in like you'll get more credit debit. That's still king, right? That's we want to ask most for those, right? We're not saying don't ask for that. But as you move along the wealth spectrum, stocks and then eventually crypto as well, because the IRS treats cryptocurrency just like securities. They avoid capital gains taxes and all of that as well. So we're talking about when we're saying giving from wealth, it's about which bucket, how they think about it, the difference those conversations can look.
And I
So,
also want to put in a quick plug for bunching and donor advised funds.
mm,
And for donors who are 70 and a half or above, actually the most tax efficient way to give is from your IRA. And that is very easy to do, but you have to set it up with your financial advisor. So again, these involve one-on-one conversations, and it's not your job to figure out crypto, stock, DApp. That is not your job. It's to arm them with questions. What is the most tax efficient way for me to give to my favorite organization with
yeah.
their broker?
Yeah. And we actually got a good question on that from Alicia. She said, well, what are some of these questions that you can use to incentivize them to ask their financial advisor? So do you have some like tactical questions that if you're in these one-on-ones or you're talking about these, what questions do you give them?
Yeah. So the first thing is getting the conversation started is actually one of the more challenging bits because once it's flowing, it's flowing.
Yeah.
It's particularly challenging when you're talking about qualified charitable distributions because you have to be age 70 and a half, and you don't want to be like, "Hi, I know
Who
you're
are you?
70 and a half. I know you're older." So what I actually suggest is pretty clever tip. Um, Especially if you're talking to a donor and you're not really sure how old they are, you can start by saying you're probably not 70 and a half, but if you were, that's probably the most tax efficient way to give. And you're going to get three answers from that. First of all, you'll get laughter, which is important. They're going to say, "Oh, sweetie, you're so sweet. Of course I am. What's the tip?" Or you're going to get, "I'm not, but I am soon," or "My spouse is. Tell me more." Or the third option is, "You're right, I'm not." And that's when you say, and that's fine too, because giving from a donor advised fund is an extremely tax efficient way to give as well, or from stock. So that immediately sets you up in your lane. The
Mhm.
second thing is that, tax smart giving, I want to just emphasize this, is only applicable to people who itemize. You might not know this, but people who take the standard deduction don't itemize. They take one lump sum and they call it a day. People who itemize how much they give charitably leads to a more
Yeah.
generous tax deduction. And so you're looking for, I like to focus the one-on-one cultivation energy on your major donors, folks who are likely homeowners, business owners, giving charitably, maybe they have medical situations and whatnot. You're very firmly in that itemization camp, and the conversation will just, unroll from there.
Yeah. The biggest thing you have to remember, right, is that they're not your donors. Like I know we think like that as fundraising professionals,
Yeah.
but you are their
Well,
pathway for generosity. So we're just setting up that pathway to be as smooth as possible and help them to give in the way that they want to give or that's most beneficial for them to give, right? So it's often meeting them where they are and just
yeah.
being curious and listening and just saying, well, how have you considered this? Have you talked to your CPA about tax efficiencies? And all you have to say is like, my understanding is that there's a lot of tax savings by giving in this way. Have you looked into it?
Mhm.
Right? Like you don't, that's why I always encourage people, you don't have to be the experts, but you have to lead them down that path.
The other great hack is open your own donor advised fund, and then you can speak about your own experience.
Mhm.
That's a really natural, authentic way to connect with a donor. You will feel much more confident talking about giving from a donor advised fund if you
Yeah.
have one yourself. And I
Yeah.
will say that the marketplace for donor advised funds is expansive now. It is not just for high net worth individuals. There is a price point for every kind of intentional donor. And
Mhm.
that's probably the biggest thing I can suggest to fundraising professionals. Go out there and shop for it and open one.
Yeah. And you can do one with like $200. Like again, to
Oh
your point,
yeah.
like, and it's
Mm-hmm.
not hard.
Mm-hmm.
It's not hard to make a DAF request, right? So there's an
Yep.
element of do it just for the toolkit of being like, oh, I set one up and I know how to use it, so it's less scary. But speaking of DAFs, I know we're coming up on time here, and we have a question that said we have a number of donors who give via DAFs. So that's great. She said, but they're all like $250 to $500. So what are the strategies for approaching them about increasing those DAF gifts? That's a great question.
It is. Well, so a DAF is a restricted fund. The money cannot come out and be used for anything else but donating to a nonprofit. So decide for yourself that it should be yours, your nonprofit, and make the ask.
Yep.
As fundraising professionals, I mean, that whatever vehicle people use to make their gift, that is at the core of what we do as professionals. You have to cultivate and steward the donor and make the ask.
Yeah.
So I just recommend that you get right into it. How are you liking giving from your donor advised fund? Um, those types of questions, and then
Yeah.
saying, would you consider giving us a gift of $1,500 this year? You're obviously an intentional giver. Congratulations on having that DAF.
Because they've already earmarked it to give,
Yeah.
to your point. Like these are already philanthropic funds. They just are sitting back and waiting to figure out, well, how much do we want to give, when, where? They already got their tax deductions. It's just sitting there. That's my one hill that I die on a lot with DAFs is I'm just like, oh my gosh, there's so much money sitting in them. How do we get them out out of the DAFs and into the nonprofit
Yeah,
hands.
it's
Mhm.
fundraising professionals still have to do that job. They still
Yeah.
have to ask for
All
those
right.
funds.
Yeah. So let's do one last question to close out. So let's try to be really tactical. How do we integrate this wealth giving approach and actually become a generosity guide? Like, what does that look like? I know 30 minutes just flies by, but if we were going to have like one or two things, what would you recommend?
Well, if you're an AFP member, this issue of AFP magazine is hitting your mailbox probably this week. There's a 5-page spread that I've written about
Nice.
becoming a generosity guide. It is a great primer. Just begin your education. By signing up for this program, you're obviously interested in the topic, and we're going to be sending you a training guide, for free after the program that will tell you all the things that you need to know about becoming a generosity guide. And once you get those basics, it's going to be a lot easier for you to absorb new information that helps you on your learning journey. So, after that, you can take a course like the ones that we give at Donor or Boom, but you're also going to find that you're attracted to articles in the Wall Street Journal about tax smart giving, and you'll understand them because you'll have the basics. You should also start role playing with your team, get the conversation going, and then I like to beta test the board members. They're your safest targets, and see if you can get there. They already feel very passionate about your mission. See if you can get them, if you can create that spark and get them to give from wealth. I think that's a great action plan.
And people love being experts, especially, our more generous givers like knowing things and they're usually kind of business savvy, right? And so there's an element where if they're given that information, they can also start to be like, hey, did you know? And they can talk to the other people in their network as well. And it's all about spreading the word. So the more we all talk about it and the more we're educating our donors and ourselves and trying to make it as easy and to your point, Sari, frictionless as possible.
Yeah.
I think the idea is we wish we could wave a magic wand and guarantee all these larger gifts, but the reality is until you're asking for them and being intentional and consistent and knowledgeable about it, they're a lot harder to come by. But the more you can equip yourself, the better. So excited to see your article come out and the
Thanks.
generosity guide as well. Sari, thank you for being with us and all of your strategic guidance, and thank you to everyone else for tuning in. Here's your final reminder. Don't leave major gifts, generous gifts on the table. So some of your donors are holding their biggest wealth and assets, and they want smart, generous ways to give. And our job is to make it as easy as possible. And of course, here at Infinite Giving, we open your brokerage account within 30 minutes. We do stocks, crypto, DAFs, endowment giving, and try to make it as easy as possible. So we're here to support you. If you're ready to get started, let us know. But we hope this conversation has been helpful. And Sari, I appreciate you so much.
And I appreciate you, Karen. Thanks for inviting me.
All right. Have a good week, everybody.